5, 4, 3, 2, 1, drop that.
Welcome to the Test Guild Performance Podcast, where we get together to learn more about performance testing and site reliability with your host, Joe Colantonio.
Hey, it's Joe, and welcome to another episode of the Test Guild Performance Podcast. Today, we'll be talking with Alex Podelko all about context-driven performance testing. Alex has specialized in performance testing since 1997 and has worked as a performance engineer and architect for several companies. Currently, he is the consulting member of technical staff at Oracle and is responsible for performance testing and optimization of enterprise performance management and business intelligent products. Alex is also one of the leading thought leaders in the performance engineering space. He writes and speaks about it all the time, so you've probably seen him at multiple conferences. And he also has an awesome website that you should check out if you're into performance testing at alexanderpodelko.com. So listen up. Let's face it, performance testing is tough. Traditional load testing tools create scripts that are bogged down in data that's hard to read and require a lot of work, even for simple playback. Load Ninja cuts out the dirty work by using AI to inspect and debug your code almost instantly. No coding necessary, no changing of hands or relays between teams either. Give it a shot. It's free and easy to try. Head on over to testguild.com/smartbear and click on the link to learn more. Hey, Alex, welcome to the Guild.
Hello, how are you?
Awesome. It's great to have you on the show. Alex, before we get into it, could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself?
You did a great introduction
Cool.
for me. Yeah, so I'm doing performance testing and maybe we can say performance engineering in general for quite a long time. It is quite interesting area. From one side, a lot of things happening around it. From another side, not many are talking or writing about it.
Why do you think that is?
I would say, my opinion, it may be one reason why performance testing becoming less sexy right now. Somehow it's going into shadow. By my opinion, it is much more important nowadays, but we hear even less about it. Maybe it related to vendors because vendors usually had budget and reason to push performance testing and advocate it and promote it. And right now, not so many vendors looks active in the place.
I would think, though, with everyone talking about the hype about AI and machine learning in automation, that in performance, I think it actually makes a little more sense for performance testing because all the logs and data that are gathered during a performance test, being able to leverage maybe a machine learning algorithm to analyze that would be a hot topic. Are you seeing any of those trends or that type of focus, or is it just still out there in the future?
I hope for this trend, but I actually see somewhat a reverse trend because before we had some advanced load testing tools that included a lot of functionality. Maybe it was not AI per se, but it was pretty sophisticated analysis, for example, in Load Runner. And now we're getting rather back to open source tools, which might be great tools for some specific purposes, but definitely lack almost any analysis there. So it should be combined with some other tools. So in my opinion, it looks like it more happening on a production side, tools to monitor and performance management on production side, and it is they are not so eager to integrate it with performance load testing. Unfortunately not. I believe that it should go that way, but it doesn't.
Also interesting, as you mentioned, performance engineering. Back in the day, I would just say performance testing or performance tester, but more people call themselves performance engineers. Is that another shift you see in the industry, maybe, that the focus is less on testing and more on performance in general, and especially in production?
I definitely see that trend. So it look. I believe up to some degree it was all the time. If you really want to make difference, you need to go beyond mere performance testing. Not only do performance testing, but say do full performance analysis and work with teams to do to optimize system, do tuning and all that stuff at least, because test results, just raw test results are not very useful. You need to get down to specific root causes that of any performance issue. So actually, I believe that good performance testers always beyond mere testing and do a lot of, let's say, performance engineering work. And it is more so now because I think we, in many organizations, we've moved to agile development. We don't have siloed team anymore, or at least not so clear cut siloed team. So it doesn't usually it doesn't work that somebody just run tests or create scripts. Still there are some cases when it works, but usually team expect from that person to do more than just scripting and running tests, do some kind of performance troubleshooting and all that stuff around it. And actually there are opinions that it should be the same person that should fix the problem. I don't think actually that it will work, but there are such opinions. And another clear trend is automation. So there is another group of opinion that everything should be automated. So performance tests should be done in an automated way, which is a good thing if we remember that it basically would be regression performance testing, just one kind of testing, not all we need. But sometimes looks like people consider that as only and final destination. But anyway, there is some stress on kind of plumbing skills and getting performance testing to build into this continuous integration, continuous development. So actually, I think, yes, that it should move more in performance engineering, and the person who working with performance should go beyond performance testing and trace that from the beginning performance requirements to the end when to see how things going in production. But actually, I don't see that either. So it's somewhere in the middle. It moved beyond performance testing, but not far, in my opinion.
It's actually a good segue because you have a concept called context-driven performance testing. You did mention agile and it's not just about.
Yes, I say shamelessly borrowed this term from functional testing because, by my opinion, it describes the situation perfectly. Before, with waterfall development, we had pretty standard process with performance testing. Let's say kind of traditional load testing when somewhere before release of the product, performance team get project of performance testing of this product, which was done with some kind of corporate level load testing tool like Load Runner or similar tool. Practically in any corporation you could find then performance testing groups. They are in different places, but almost everywhere you can find them. They run tests if either product was good enough and was released or it get back to development. And I don't want to say that it was bad or wrong process. That was exactly right process for waterfall development because you couldn't do much before product would be ready. Actually, I had long time ago some presentation on the topic of agile performance testing where I was talking what you could do before it to start earlier, but it was still some side things like checking performance requirements, maybe testing some technology, but overall you couldn't do much. And now it changed, and I would say it changed drastically because now almost, well, at least in areas where I'm working, everybody moved to kind of agile iterative development. So you have a working product practically from the very beginning. So you could work with a product and do performance testing from the beginning. And suddenly we get much more options than it was before. Theory behind traditional load testing was that you need to make test system as close to production as possible, make workload as realistic as possible. And when I talk about that, we in some cases we need other kind of tests, for example, just to investigate specific performance issue. I even got criticized for that. But when you have realistic workload, it means probably a mix of workload. It is not so easy to use for tracing performance problems or finding best way to optimize the system. And now it somewhat changed. From one side, system became much more sophisticated. So in some cases, it is even not feasible to test the whole system to do full-scale test. We still would like probably to do that if we could, but at least it is not feasible to run this test all the time against full system. And we definitely getting performance testing embedded in a continuous integration process in one way or another. It is far from finalizing, but we definitely move that direction. If it was exotic some time ago, now it is more and more used. And if you work with agile team from the beginning, you just don't have time to run tests manually with every label or build or whatever would be your process. So you need to find out some set of tests that you want to run. But still we have, as I mentioned, it just performance regression tests. So we're just making sure that performance is the same and we don't have any problem with it. It's still not eliminate other kind of tests. For example, a full-scale test against the system to make sure the system will handle full load. We still want to do that if we could. Or test system for memory leak, run test for a long time. If you run it for several days, you definitely don't want to make it a part of continuous integration. Probably should be in parallel to main process. So we have a lot of different options of what we can do now, which has different purpose, mitigate different risks, and have different costs associated with it. So, and in this sense, term context-driven fits it, by my opinion, the situation perfectly. So depending on context on your system, you need to find the best way to mitigate performance risks. Doesn't mean that you need to do every possible performance test you need. Maybe you don't. And now it is even more part of performance engineering because some part other things mitigate performance risks too. So, for example, if you have full control on your production system and you have good monitoring in it, and you do some kind of canary testing in production, your risk is lower. So maybe you don't need to spend uh, too much time testing um, system before that. But from another side, I still believe that you need to do performance testing to eliminate whatever you could, because moving testing it on real users, I still believe it is not the best idea. It was somewhat popularized by companies that work in social networks or some other kind of customer entertainment, which have, of course, very interesting and cutting edge technologies, but they can allow themselves that some not optimal customer experience. But in other worlds, when we have some financial system or some other kind of systems that are mission critical, or IoT system when real things depends on it, you don't want to test everything on customers. You need to do good chunk of work before. But how much it depends on your system and what is your risk.
Are you able to do exploratory testing with performance testing? Is that one way that someone can use to get over this just full-blown performance testing mindset that some folks still might have?
I always believe that we should do, and I always believe that it fit performance testing even more than functional testing, because actually until you start testing, you don't know how your system behaves. For example, to create dozens of scripts and run them all together is never was a good idea. But at least create the scripts one by one, run some tests to see how different components of the system behave. It is not just pass fail. Performance testing never was just pass fail, because it was major input to all configuration, capacity planning, sizing, performance troubleshooting. And when you start to run tests, you start to understand how system behaves on that load and how sensitive it is to the load. And in most cases, if in functional testing, you know how system supposed to behave. In performance, actually, you don't. You have some hopes or requirements, but when you start to test system, you have no idea if it will perform up to these requirements, or it fails with two users. So only when you start testing, you get some information about system. And exploratory testing, the definition is like getting information from about system along with testing it. So I would say you always have kind of exploratory performance testing before you build that full scale test or maybe continuous performance test, because you need to figure out what to include there. You could do it otherwise, create everything and then start to figure out what is working and what is not. So that what you get if you start just formally create scripts and add them, because performance is more sensitive and depends on all moving parts. So when you try to move all parts together, it is difficult to understand what is going on and how we can narrow down the problem we are working with. Because I guess that formal approach assumes that we don't have problems with the system, but it never happened in my practice. With every single new system, we had problems. Maybe with mature system, which are already in use for a long time, and some small changes, you have already that information. But it means that you just did that kind of exploratory performance testing before it, or maybe you did it in production. You just say experiment on your customer and collected information on system behavior from real workload.
Absolutely. So it seems like, a lot of things have changed in the past 20 years I've been in performance testing. One of them also from traditional performance testing was environments, like being able to stand up environment exactly like you had in production. And the other way to really test was to test in production. But nowadays, we have cloud solutions. Any thoughts around how the environment, how you can use context testing against the different environments now that teams have to deal with?
Yes, sure. So every kind of tests in a way require different environment. So from one side, actually, it is even simpler. Nobody, by some reason, nobody talking about it. But in cloud environment, you could create a test setup as close as production as you want. You just pay more for this. So before it was just whatever you have in the lab. So it was practically impossible to scale it up, and it took a lot of time to get new equipment and set up new equipment. Right now, you could run some kind of full-scale test, or at least large-scale test for short period of time without much cost in cloud. But it is interesting that somehow that point is not highlighted. But from another side, you get new kind of performance testing and needs, context needs that don't need that such big environment. So if you want to do it as part of continuous integration, so in that iterative development, just to run small kind of smoke test to make sure that nothing wrong is with performance before deploying it. You don't want to run that full scale test because you need a lot of time and resources to deploy it. You need to do it quickly. And here I have some kind of discussions that if you don't do it with realistic environments, there is no use of it. You can miss a lot of problems related with full scale system. I don't believe that it is a good reasoning because it is not all or nothing game here. Even if you run 10 user tests, you could catch quite a few performance issues or at least see if performance degrade. Even single user test is helpful because if single user performance degrade, multi-user performance would probably degrade too. It may be a few exceptions, very exotic, but as a rule, you even just single user performance test, right? Just running functional test and checking timing would be helpful. Yes, you definitely could miss some performance issue and then more performance tests and larger scale and more realistic tests you will run, the more problem you will catch. But it has costs associated with that too. And it still doesn't guarantee you that everything will work perfectly in production. Nothing guarantee you. You could mitigate risk, decrease risk that something going wrong, but it's still not a full guarantee because you never could do everything you can see in production in your test environment. It always could be some weird combination that will impact performance in some unpredicted way. But I don't see it as a reason to not do performance testing. I would say one more reason to do different levels of performance testing to mitigate performance risk as much as possible in some reasonable way.
And I guess context-driven also is, I love, I'll have a PDF in the show notes that you have on this whole topic, but you have some good questions to ask about defining risk in your performance testing strategy. So that can help guide the teams to know what to focus their efforts on.
Definitely. And again, it changed a lot because we have different kind of a system, like IoT systems that just kind different animal. So you may need quite a different approach there, or some other kind of system. So before they become distributed system in real sense of the word. So they became dynamically configured system. So you even don't know what configuration is. So many tools, monitoring tools have a kind of configuration discovery. Again, and behavior system become different, that not necessarily behave in straightforward way. It may adjust functionality depending on load. So all kind of resilience and reliability engineering, some solutions of how you move load or when something fails in your system. And that related to performance and related to performance testing.
Okay, Alex, before we go, what's the best way people could find or contact you?
You could find me on Twitter at Podelko. They could send me email again at Podelko, first initial and last name at yahoo.com. And LinkedIn, I trying to accept all requests, at least for people who somehow involved in high tech. So if somebody want to discuss something with me, we can use any of this media. Probably email and LinkedIn will be better for discussions.
Thank you, Alex, for your performance testing awesomeness. For links to everything of value we talked about in this episode, head on over to testguild.com/P like performance P09. And while you're there, make sure to click on the Try It Today link under the exclusive sponsor section to learn all about Smart Bear's awesome performance testing solution, Load Ninja. And if this episode has helped you in any way, if you haven't already, why not rate and review it in iTunes? Ratings really help in the rankings and help expose the show to more new people. And you can help spread performance testing awesomeness to the masses. So that's it for this episode of the Performance Testing and Site Reliability Podcast. I'm Joe, and my mission is to help you succeed with creating end-to-end automation awesomeness. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Test Guild Performance Podcast. Head on over to testguild.com for full show notes, amazing blog articles, and online testing conferences. Make sure to subscribe to join the guild and continue your testing journey. This has been a Joe Calantonio production.